The grand ballroom glittered like a dream crafted to impress, its towering crystal chandeliers scattering diamonds of light across every polished marble surface. Rows of gilded chairs stretched out like soldiers in formation, each one filled with the city's elite. Financiers, diplomats, society wives, and rival shows all dressed in their finest. They whispered behind jeweled hands, not because they were unaccustomed to such opulence, but because of the man standing at the altar, Alexander James Morrison. 35 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly groomed, and radiating the kind of cold command that had built him a billion-dollar empire. His gray suit was tailored to precision, yet his rigid stance betrayed a storm beneath the polished surface. His square jaw was locked tight, his lips a thin line of irritation, and though his eyes remained fixed forward, every muscle in his body screamed resistance. This was not a wedding born of love. It was a cage, welded together by a promise he had not made but was forced to honor. His father, a titan of industry, had once shaken hands with Harold Whitmore, a lifelong friend and fellow entrepreneur. Together, they had vowed to unite their families through marriage, sealing the pact with the weight of old-world tradition. Neither man had expected fate to hold them accountable decades later, long after the promise was forgotten by the next generation. Yet when both fathers died within months of each other, the contract resurfaced, airtight, ironclad, legally binding, and utterly merciless. Alexander had spent months fighting it. He had unleashed his team of the sharpest lawyers money could buy, but the contract was flawless. If he refused a marriage, he would forfeit not only his father's fortune, but also control the company he had spent his life building. The Whitmores had cornered him, ensuring compliance through the one thing Alexander valued most, his empire. He loathed them for it. And now here he stood, in front of hundreds of expectant eyes, waiting for a woman he had never seen. The orchestra shifted, strings swelling as the bridal march began. A hush rippled through the ballroom, followed by the synchronized turn of every guest's head toward the massive double doors at the end of the aisle. Alexander did not look. He refused to play into their spectacle. His jaw flexed, his fists clenched at his sides. If they expected desperation, if they hoped to see the mighty Morrison heir brought low, they would be disappointed. This marriage was business, transactional, contractual, unavoidable. Nothing more. But as the footsteps drew closer, a faint fragrance drifted toward him. Jasmine, delicate yet undeniably present. The scent brushed against his senses, pricking at something buried deep, something he had not felt in years. The bride reached his side, and still Alexander did not turn. The officiant's voice filled the silence. Words of ceremony echoed across the ballroom. Meaningless syllables Alexander repeated with mechanical precision. His mind was elsewhere, already plotting his escape strategy. He would honor the contract of the required year, maintain appearances, and then annul the union quietly. Separate residences, minimal contact, a life neatly divided. He would salvage what he could from this disaster and ensure the Whitmores never benefited more than the bare minimum. Do you, Alexander James Morrison, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. The words were bitter ash on his tongue. And do you, Catherine Grace Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. The voice was soft, warm, and steady, unexpectedly steady. It wasn't the simpering tone of a socialite eager to ensnare him, nor the cold calculation he expected from someone complicit in this scheme. It unsettled him. You may now kiss the bride. Finally, Alexander turned. The veil was a wall of lace and tradition, concealing everything but the outline of a face. He reached out, his hand betraying the slightest tremor of frustration, and lifted it slowly. The entire ballroom leaned forward, breath held in collective suspense. First, he saw her chin delicate, refined. Then lips, soft, naturally pink. A slender nose, finely shaped. And then her eyes, green, strikingly, arrestingly green. But it wasn't their beauty that stunned him. It was what lived behind them. Intelligence, quiet strength, and a recognition that pierced him like a blade. He froze. You, he whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. Her lips curved into faintest, saddest smile. Hello, Alexander. The world tilted. 15 years vanished in a flash, replaced by the memory of a sweltering summer internship his father had insisted upon. Alexander had been 20, brash, arrogant, determined to prove his independence. And among the interns was a quiet, diligent girl from a modest background, Catherine Whitmore. He remembered her, though at the time he hadn't seen her. She had worn simple clothes, no makeup, her blonde hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. While others partied after hours, Catherine stayed late in the library, devouring books on strategy and finance. She had been brilliant, sharper than most of the privileged heirs around her, and he had been cruel. She had presented an idea during a meeting, an innovative expansion strategy that had startled even the supervisors. But Alexander, too inflated by his own ego, had dismissed it with a mocking remark in front of everyone. He remembered her expression, the way she had shrunk back, humiliated. Later that evening, he'd stumbled upon her crying quietly in the stairwell. Instead of apologizing, he had walked past, heart-hardened by pride. The next day, she was gone. She had disappeared from the program, and he had never given it another thought, until now. But the woman standing before him was no longer that timid girl. This Catherine was transformed, poised, radiant, and carrying herself with a quiet confidence that rivaled his own. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was a steel in her gaze, the intelligence burning there that shook him to his core. The officiant cleared his throat. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Alexander realized he had been staring too long. He bent and pressed his lips briefly to hers. It was supposed to be formal, perfunctory, yet the contact sent a jolt racing through him, as though touching something he didn't understand. When he pulled back, he caught a flicker in her eyes, pain perhaps, or resignation. The reception unfolded like a blur. Laughter, champagne flutes, polite congratulations. Alexander played the part of attentive groom flawlessly, masking the storm raging inside him. Catherine did the same, smiling, gracious, deflecting intrusive questions with practiced charm. But when the night wound down and the ballroom emptied, the mask slipped. They found themselves in a quiet corner, the last of the music fading into silence. The chandeliers glowed above them, casting softer light now that the crowd had gone. Alexander spoke first, his voice low, edged with unspoken questions. "Why didn't you tell me?" Catherine met his eyes, unflinching. "Would it have mattered? You made it very clear you wanted no part of this marriage. My identity would not have changed that." "I remember you," he said slowly. "From the internship. You left suddenly." Her expression flickered. "Just for a moment." "Yes. Some environments aren't conducive to learning." The words struck deep. He winced, the weight of old shame pressing hard. "I was cruel to you," he admitted. "You were young, arrogant," Catherine replied simply. "We both were different people then." Alexander studied her in silence. This was no pawn, no hidden trap. This was a woman who had endured, who had grown into someone formidable. And for the first time that night, he felt the faint stirrings of something other than anger. Alexander's voice softened, curiosity threading through his usual steel. "What happened after that summer?" "I looked into the Whitmore family later, saw reports that they were modest, struggling. And yet here you are, standing in front of me like someone born into power. What changed?" Catherine's lips curved into a wry, almost bitter smile. She turned her gaze toward the glittering chandeliers above them, as if the light might shield her from a memory. "Harold Whitmore, my uncle, was your father's friend, but he was never my father. When my parents died in a car accident, I was 17. Harold took me in out of obligation, not love. To him, I was a burden, another mouth to feed, another shadow in his pristine household. He tolerated me only because of the contract your father and his had signed." Her eyes flicked back to his, steady and unflinching now. "When I left that internship, Harold was furious. He saw me as wasted potential. But when the old contract resurfaced after both our fathers died, his fury turned to calculation. He realized I was his ticket to the Morrison fortune. So he shaped me, molded me. A year of endless etiquette lessons, carefully curated social appearances, training to be the perfect society wife. And through it all, He kept my identity hidden from you. He wanted to unveil me only when it was too late for you to refuse. Alexander's hands curled into fists at his sides. His chest burned with a mix of anger and guilt. Anger at Harold's manipulation, guilt at his own part in Catherine's painful past. "And you agreed to this?" he asked sharply. "Why?" "You could have refused. You could have walked away." Catherine's laughter was short and humorless. "Walked away to where?" "I had no money, no support, no family left. If I refused, I would have been cut off entirely, with nothing but my name. At least this way, I had a future. Uncertain, yes, but not non-existent. Besides," her voice softened, her eyes searching his face, "the contract bound you regardless. If it wasn't me, it would have been another Whitmore cousin plucked from obscurity. At least this way, you're stuck with someone who understands what it means to start from nothing." Her words landed heavily. Alexander studied her, seeing not just elegance but resilience. She was a survivor, sharper and stronger than he had given her credit for. "You've changed," he murmured. "So have you," Catherine replied without hesitation. "The Alexander Morrison I knew would never have honored a contract that didn't benefit him directly. Yet here you are, standing beside me, married because you chose honor over convenience. That says something." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Alexander broke it. "What do you want from this marriage?" Catherine considered the question with deliberate care. Her answer, when it came, was steady and unvarnished. "Honestly, I want to prove I'm more than a bargaining chip. I want to show that I have value beyond being Harold's pawn or your father's obligation. And if we're both very lucky, perhaps we might build something resembling partnership, maybe even trust." "You want to work?" Alexander asked, surprise flickering across his features. Her eyes sparked, and for the first time that night, genuine passion colored her voice. "I have a master's degree in business strategy from Columbia. I earned in the evenings, while Harold dragged me to charity luncheons and etiquette rehearsals. I may have been forced into this marriage, but I refuse to be reduced to a decorative wife, smiling on cue while the real work passes me by. If I must live under this contract, then I will live it on my own terms." Something shifted inside Alexander. Against all odds, against all his stubborn resistance, admiration crept in. He had walked into this ballroom expecting a trap. Instead, he had found an equal. Slowly, carefully, he said, "Then I have a proposal. We honor the contract for the required year. But instead of living separate lives, we treat this as a genuine partnership. You want to contribute? My company could use someone with your mind. Work with me. Prove your worth. And when the year is up, we decide together whether to continue this marriage or part as allies." Catherine blinked, startled. Then her eyes narrowed. "You'd give me a position in your company?" "Not give," Alexander corrected firmly. "You'll earn it. I expect from you what I demand from every employee: excellence, discipline, results. But yes, I think you could be an asset." "Why?" she challenged softly. "Why change your mind so suddenly?" Alexander's gaze dropped, his jaw tightening. "Because 15 years ago, I was too blind, too arrogant to see your worth. I will not make the same mistake twice." Her breath caught. For a long, silent moment, her emotions flickered like shifting shadows. Surprise, disbelief, something dangerously close to hope. Then she extended her hand between them, formal and deliberate. "Partners, then. For 1 year. We'll see where it leads." Alexander clasped her hand, firm and steady. Partners. And for the first time since discovering the contract, he felt not anger, but possibility. A year of transformation. The months that followed changed everything. Catherine stepped into Morrison Technologies not as the CEO's wife, but as a strategist. At first, the board dismissed her as ornamental, but she dismantled their doubts with sharp analysis, predicting market shifts others had overlooked. She streamlined divisions, exposed inefficiencies, and presented expansion strategies that saved the company millions. Alexander, skeptical at first, found himself relying on her more with each passing week. She was fearless in meetings, challenging him in ways no one else dared. Where he was decisive and bold, she was meticulous and calculating. They balanced one another perfectly. Their professional partnership bled into their personal lives. Dinners once strained with silence turned into debates over market trends, laughter over shared frustrations, and long evenings where strategy gave way to stories of their pasts. Slowly, cautiously, respect became friendship. Friendship deepened into something warmer, something they both hesitated to name. The anniversary. On their first anniversary, the house was quiet. Catherine stood by the window of their shared office, looking out at the city lights like a queen surveying her domain. The year had been grueling, transformative, and strangely fulfilling. Alexander entered the room silently, his presence filling it. He came to stand beside her, their reflections framed together in the glass. "The year is up," he said softly. "According to our agreement, this is where we decide." Catherine turned, her green eyes searching his face. "And what do you want, Alexander?" He took her hands in his voice steady, raw, unguarded. "I want to tear up that contract. I want to choose this marriage freely. Not because of our fathers, not because of Harold, not because of obligation, but because I choose you. Somewhere in this year, Catherine, I fell in love with my wife." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling despite her best effort to contain them. "Despite everything, I fell in love with you, too. Not the arrogant boy I once knew, but the man who stands before me now." Alexander's heart surged. "Then marry me again. No contracts, no veils, no obligations. Just us." Her answer came as a whisper, trembling but certain. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. A new beginning." They renewed their vows in a small garden ceremony, surrounded only by close friends. No grand ballroom, no hidden veils, no contracts. This time, Alexander looked at Catherine and saw everything clearly, her strength, her brilliance, her beauty inside and out. And he knew, without the faintest shadow of doubt, that sometimes the greatest loves are not chosen by contracts or destiny. They are forged in the fire of mistakes, second chances, and the courage to lift the veil.